Hey everyone, welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write about movies, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
And my name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network, and I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, sure am.
I said that like an episode of Danger Mouse, if everybody remembers that cartoon from the early 80s. So anyway.
Sure do.
Thank you. We have lots of movies on the show tonight because Evan and Megan spent some time at IFFBoston. So they're going to regale you with tales of flicks from that festival. Then we have the new Shudder anthology film, Horror Noir, with an E on the end of noir. And then finally, we have a kind of a rare thing on Spoiler Piece. There's a re-release of the 1990 Sundance winner, Chameleon Street. And so we will be talking about that. But without further ado, why don't Evan and Megan, why don't you talk about IFFBoston?
Okay. So I'm going to start with talking about the films that I saw. And then Evan and I are both going to talk about two of the films we each saw.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be talking about Spencer, Memoria, Belfast, and Happening. And then later, Evan and I will talk about Petite Maman and The Worst Person in the World. I'm going to kick things off with Spencer because this was one of my most anticipated films of the year. It is starring Kristen Stewart, whom I love. I think she's been a very underrated actress for quite some time, and I'm glad people are finally getting on the bandwagon that she's great, because she is, and she always has been. Just I don't think every filmmaker knows what to do with her very particular style of speaking and acting.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Pablo Larraín. He is quickly becoming one of my favorite filmmakers. I am a huge fan of Jackie, and I absolutely adore Emma, which was released finally after a couple years. Finally released this year. And I loved Spencer as well. And it captures Diana Spencer, Princess Diana, in a weekend. It's a Christmas weekend. So it's 3 days of her life. Very similar to Jackie, where that's like one day in the life of Jackie O. And this is just 3. And we do see the other family members. We see her sons, we see Charles, we see the Queen, but mostly it focuses on her. She really carries the entire film, and everything really hinges on her performance. And she is incredible. I found this to be a phenomenal performance. She really captured Princess Diana's cadence and body gestures and her breathy accent. But beyond that, it doesn't just feel like she's doing, an impersonation or a caricature or anything like that. It feels like this is a very unique character. So yes, it is based on Princess Diana's life and infused by certain elements of her life, but it really feels like just a unique study of an individual.
Nice.
There's gorgeous cinematography by Claire Mathon, who I love, who did Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Atlantics. And her cinematography is just gorgeous. There's lots of candlelight, lots of mirrors. The score by Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead is fantastic. Sometimes it's a discordant string score. Sometimes it's piano or jazzy or classical. It's kind of all over the place. But it always highlights how trapped, stifled, and claustrophobic Diana feels in this world, at least in this film. This is not intended to be completely accurate. So a lot of liberties are taken. Although it does focus on how she yearns for freedom, and it also focuses on her yearning to assert control over her life and herself. Like, she's very defiant in this film. Like, she's constantly expected to be at dinner at like certain times. Her wardrobe is all laid out, and she's supposed to wear certain dresses at certain breakfasts and dinners, and she'll switch it up and wear something different that she's not supposed to. And then she gets in trouble for it, and she gets talked to about it, which is absurd. But she also is dealing very prominently in the film with bulimia, which is something Princess Diana actually struggled with in real life. So it's something interesting to see that this is depicted on screen as well. But yeah, it's just, I love how this captures a very brief moment in time in a famous, enigmatic iconic, charismatic woman's life. And it's really a fascinating portrait to see. I also really like that Emma's an unabashed queer film. There's a queer character in this too. It's someone who Diana confides in, one of the women who dresses her and picks out her clothes, played by Sally Hawkins, who's really great. Someone, I wish I could remember who, but someone on Twitter called this a fractured fairy tale in reverse. And I thought that was a perfect description of it because it really feels like an unraveling. Like everything seems like it's supposed to be very romantic. There's this beautiful location that they're staying at, this gorgeous house. They're not house, but palace. And there's gorgeous costumes and clothes and everything is just luxurious. And it should be romantic. It should be lovely. And everything's just crumbling around her. And it's really fascinating to see.
Sounds like a good movie.
Cool.
Looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it was. I loved it. So one of the other films was Belfast, which is Kenneth Branagh's semi-autobiographical film of his childhood in Belfast with his brother and his parents during the Troubles, and Catholics were persecuted. And he was not Catholic. He was Protestant, but he lived in a neighborhood where there were a lot of Protestant families and Catholic families, and he saw them getting beaten up and people's houses getting burned. And so like the community comes together and kind of builds barricades and has like nightly neighborhood or not even nightly, but daily and nightly watches to kind of try to keep guard of things. But there's a gang moving in who are trying to cause a lot of trouble and a lot of violence. And his father is away from home a lot because his father works in London. And so he's not always home. And so their single mother, played by Katrina Balfe, is taking care of them. And yeah, so that's basically what it's about. And it's black and white. So I've seen comparisons to Roma because it's an incredibly personal film for Kenneth Branagh. Roma was obviously an incredibly personal film too. I don't think they could be more different though. This has even though it's dealing with a lot of heavy themes, it has a very light tone to it. It's very humorous. The dialogue is very amusing. But the performances are good. I liked this. It didn't wow me. The kid who plays Kenneth Branagh's surrogate is funny. He's precocious and a funny kid. But I will say there's one scene that really floored me and it was really great. And it's a scene between the kid and his grandfather, Kieran Hines, who's always great. And it's an incredibly touching scene that's really, really emotional and he plays his grandfather and his grandfather's always asking, like, your father wants to do this, your mother wants to do this. What do you want to do? What do you want for your life? And it seems like his grandfather's the only one who's kind of asking him what he wants. And it's just lovely relationship to witness.
That sounds awesome. I love him as an actor. I love when he shows up in things.
He's so good. Yeah, he's amazing in this. He's my favorite. Yeah, and Judi Dench is in this too. She's great, but really, yeah, it's Hines who's amazing in it. And I also saw Happening, which is a French film that I believe won the Golden Lion, and it's directed and co-written by Audrey Diwan about a teen girl in 1963 who gets pregnant at a time when abortion is illegal. And so she tries to get an abortion. It's an incredibly powerful and harrowing film, especially because time keeps ticking away as each of the passing weeks is chronicled through on-screen titles. We're seeing like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 9, like, it just keeps going. It's like, oh my God. Because the longer it goes, the more difficult it is for a person to get an abortion. And that's no different back in the 60s as well. It's nerve-wracking. It's a really good lead performance by Anna Maria Vartolomei. And we also see, and she's very adamant right from the beginning. She's like, she's going to this prestigious school, this college prep school. And she's like, I do not want to have a child. I'm going to get an abortion. And everybody around her, and she doesn't really talk openly about it because it's illegal. But when she kind of either hints at it or, intimates that she's going to do this, and people don't even know she's pregnant, she's just kind of like bringing it up kind of loosely. People are like horrified. One of her friends is like, don't even joke about that. Don't even talk about it. And so her friends' reactions, they're varied. That's kind of interesting to see because some are supportive, some are not. And so it's just very interesting to see. And of course, it's also interesting to see how things have changed today and how, in many cases, things have not changed, considering all of the abortion restrictions that we're dealing with now. So this is a film adaptation of an autobiographical novel, and it's just a really interesting film, and I really liked it.
Sounds compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the final film before Evan, you and I converse, is Memoria. And Memoria is the Colombian entry for the Oscars that was just announced. And this was my first time watching a film by Apichatpong Weerasethkul. And this is a really bizarre, unusual film. And I love that. Tilda Swinton is fantastic, as always. And she portrays a woman who hears a sound. She's like awoken in the middle of the night by this sound, this like loud boom. And she'll hear it kind of sporadically. And she's trying to find out why she's hearing this sound. So she goes to a guy who does sound design for films, and he has like a whole catalog of sounds, and she's describing the sound, and she's like, no, the sound should be earthier. No, the sound should sound more hollow, like various things. And he's constantly tweaking it. And finally he gets the sound right. And she's like, yes, that's it. And then she becomes kind of compelled to keep hearing the sound. And so that kind of takes her on a very interesting journey. And it's very, very strange. And I will say that the film made me incredibly relaxed, like almost so that I was sleepy. And I don't mean that as like an insult. Like it wasn't like I was bored or anything. It's just that it's got these soothing sounds of gentle rainfall and long silences. Like there is a scene where Tilda Swinton is holding the wrist of a gentleman, and they're sitting at a table, and it's like silence for a good 15 minutes. And it's all you hear is the rain, and and you hear other sounds too. And the sound design is really incredible, but it's a film like nothing I've ever seen before. And it takes a sharp turn and strangely veers into sci-fi territory, which is so interesting, weird, bizarre, but great. And yeah, I'm really, really glad I saw this for a couple of reasons. And one of them is that it's, this is a thought-provoking, analytical, haunting, kind of quietly provocative film. And it's very unconventional, and it's an experience. It's definitely a film I don't feel like I watched. I feel like I experienced it. Like I feel like I was immersed in it. And I'm particularly glad that I saw it at the Brattle, because part of IFFBoston's Fall Focus, because Neon is distributing it, but they're doing it they have a very strange release plan for it. They're going to only be releasing it one city at a time for a week at a time in like one theater. And that's the only way you will ever be able to see it. Supposedly it's never going to be streaming. So you'll never be able to see it anywhere else except in a theater that happens to come to in that particular city or town.
This sounds like an ASMR movie to me.
Yes, it is.
I have to see it.
You do have to see it. I'm not into ASMR, but yes, it definitely is ASMR-y. You would love it.
I mean, two people holding hands for 15 minutes while it rains? Jesus.
Yes, and sounds. And there's sounds. There's other sounds too. I don't want to. You'll see. You'll see when you see.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. When I left and came back, the person like scanning tickets said to me, she's like, "What did you think of it?" And I was like, "That was a weird experience, but I was into it." And she was like, "Yeah, it was so weird. Like it was just, it's hard to talk about, but it's really fascinating." So Evan, let's talk about the last two films, Petite Maman and The Worst Person in the World.
Which one do you want to do first?
Let's do Petite Maman.
Yeah, I feel like that one's a better one to do. It's short. It's like amazingly short. It's 72 minutes.
Yep. And really 71 because like there's credits.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it's written and directed by Celine Sciamma.
Who's my favorite filmmaker.
Yep. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, right?
Oh. Oh, yes. Right.
Yeah, okay. Celine Sciamma and Kylie Reichardt are probably my two favorites.
Good choices.
So this is about a girl named Nellie, and she's just lost her grandmother, and she goes with her father and mother to clean out her grandmother's house, which is the house her mother grew up in. And then while she goes and wanders off in the woods and meets this girl who is the same age as her, looks almost exactly like her, and is building a fort out there and asks for help building the fort. And we find out that this is her mom at the same age. And she goes back to her mom's house and gets to see her grandmother as a young woman and spend time with her mom and her grandmother. And she knows pretty quickly that what's happening. So she's onto what's going on. But she actually later tells the younger version of her mother what's going on. So they kind of sync up and know what's going on. But it's about them spending time together and hanging out and getting to know each other. And it's just a really sweet film, and I like the idea. I think it's a really cool premise, and I just think it's really well acted and really well done. And I don't know, I enjoyed it. It's short. For me, it felt a little slow in places despite being so short, but I really thought the performances were great, and I loved the house and seeing the house in like different time periods and how they did the decoration. And then seeing it like as it's being emptied out and seeing that comparison. And I don't know, I really enjoyed this.
I'm so glad because I loved this. Yeah, I agree with you about seeing the house in different stages. Like I love how in the today of the house, it's like white wall except for the square of wallpaper where the fridge was like covering it. And then, but then in the older version of the house, it's like all wallpaper. So it's like a great visual cue to be like, I don't know why you would forget, but if you forgot, you could be like, oh yeah, this is the house. This is when we're in. And yeah, I loved the children's performances. I thought Nellie in particular was really great, but her young mom, who I think is Marion, she also was lovely. And seeing them have fun together and be silly, even after Marion learns like, oh, hey, you're my, kid in the future. She kind of takes it in stride, and then they just have fun. And it's so lovely to see. And it's such an emotional film that's such a tender elegy to grief and time and the bonds of like parents and children. It's just love. It's lovely. It's absolutely lovely. And one of the reasons Celine Sciamma is one of my favorite filmmakers, or probably she is my favorite filmmaker. I don't know why I'm saying one of, but part of the reason, I mean, she does so much exploration with gender and sexuality. And as a queer woman filmmaker, I really love that she does that. As a queer woman myself, I love seeing a queer woman filmmaker do that. But I love that so many of her films, most of her films actually, explore childhood. And she does it in such a sensitive way that really respects children and respects their interior lives and expects their dreams and their desires. And she treats them like people, not like lesser than. And I love that about her. And I love this film. And I love in the opening scene, we see Nellie and she's saying goodbye to everyone in the nursing home because she didn't get the chance to say goodbye to her grandmother. And then she does get the chance to say goodbye to her grandmother for, when she sees her, in the past. And I love that. It's such a sweet moment. And I know what you mean about it being slow. I didn't find it slow, but I do know what you mean because I found myself being like, I finally was getting like really, really into it, like right at the end. And then it ended. It's like, I'm so into it. And then it's over. And it kind of was like, the rug was ripped out from under you. And I was like, it kind of feels like life. Like you don't know when you're going to die.
Right. But it didn't overstay its welcome either, which I respect in a story. It allowed the story to play out because the kind of the finite timeline of her parents finishing cleaning out her house, which actually just ends up being her dad because her mom is so grief stricken that she kind of takes off to we don't know where, and that's kind of what's interesting. It coincides with the appearance of her younger self, which I think is cool. But so you have that the cleaning out of the house, and then you have the timeline of Marion as a kid is about to have some big operation. We don't know exactly what it is, but we know it's something to do with the grandmother walked with a cane, so she had some type of condition, and then this operation is supposed to prevent her from having that issue. And so that's the kind of timeline in the past that we're working with. Whenever she leaves to go to the hospital is when they have to part ways, and then they get that extra night together where her dad's like, no, you can't stay over your friend's house. But then they convince him like, okay, yeah, sure, you can. And I love that the dad could see the younger version of the mom, because I was not sure whether that was going to be a thing or not. I thought maybe she could be entirely in, Nellie's imagination, but no, she is actually there. The dad sees the younger version of the mom, not knowing it's the mom.
Right. But that scene is so gutting for multiple reasons. For that reason, but also, the fact that he's like, oh, well, there'll be another time, and why don't you stay over her house another time, and Nellie like touches him and she's like, there is no other time. It's so
this is it.
Yeah, it's like so somber and serious, because it is a somber situation, but it's lovely. It's executed so well.
Mm-hmm.
Love everything about it.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, yay. I'm so glad.
Should we talk about the worst person in the world?
Yes.
Who's shockingly not that bad of a person, I would say.
No, and it's also, the film's dialogue is also not referring to her. It's referring to her second boyfriend, which is interesting. So anyway.
Yeah. So this is they tell you right in the beginning, this is a film in 12 chapters with a prologue and an epilogue. So It's definitely woof. That I think that for me, that's my biggest gripe with the movie, is that although I was intrigued by the characters and their dialogue and the situations, I just thought, woof, this was slow.
No. Whereas I did not find this slow at all. I was fascinated by it.
It's directed and written by Joachim Trier, and it's co-written by Eskil Vogt. I think I got that right.
Joachim Trier.
Gotcha.
And, only because I studied the pronunciation via video.
Yes, thank you. And the log line for this is, it chronicles 4 years in the life of Julie, a young woman who navigates the troubled waters of her love life and struggles to find her career path, leading her to take a realistic look at who she really is. So it's like 4 years in her life, who she's dating, what she's doing. And for me, I felt those 4 years, but I don't know. I did find parts of this pretty compelling, and I liked the performances in it.
Yeah, I would say the performances, especially, I feel weird calling her Julie because I know her name's Julie, but in the film they call her Yulia. But yes, Yulia, whichever you want to call her. Yeah, she was great. I think it's Renata Riensve. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I may not be. Yeah, and she won the Best Actress at Cannes, and I can definitely see why, because it's a really great layered performance, and I really, really liked it. And I liked the performances by her two boyfriends as well, especially the first boyfriend. And she does not have two boyfriends at the same time. She is not poly. She has one boyfriend who is much older than her, and he's at a different place in his life. No surprise, because she's like in her late 20s and he's in his early 40s. And he's more, he's further along in his career. He knows he wants kids, where she doesn't know she wants kids. She doesn't know what she wants to do for a career. She kind of flits around to thing to thing to thing. Like first she was in med school. Then she's like, I'm going to be a photographer. Then she's like, I'm going to be a writer. And she works at a bookstore this whole time. And she always talks about how it's a temporary job, but it's really not, because she works there for like 4 years. And so, so that's really interesting. And then I know she talks about how they're not cheating, but she basically has an emotional cheating night with this other guy who's very nice. And then she breaks up independently with her first boyfriend, and he breaks up with his girlfriend, and then they get together. But I have to say, and I also really love the raw dialogue. I think the dialogue is one of my favorite things, one of my favorite components of the film. But I have to say, when her first boyfriend, when she reconnects with him because she finds out from a friend of his at the bookstore that he has cancer, and it's like progressed really rapidly and he's not going to live much longer. So she like kind of drops everything to go and see him and like spend as much time with him as possible. I loved that. And I loved their discussions, and I love how they come back together. And she's like, I don't have conversations with anyone like I do with you. And it's just, there's something very lovely seeing that. And as someone who has not stayed friends with exes and has stayed friends with exes, and my best friend is an ex of mine, it's very interesting to see that and see how your relationship changes. And I really think the film shows that beautifully.
Yeah, it does. I did find that those scenes very compelling where she goes to see him and she spends like a whole day there.
Yeah.
And they have like their conversations run the gamut of all different aspects of their lives, their relationship, her, current relationship with the other guy. She finds out that she's pregnant and she talks to Axel, her ex, about that and how she feels about that because she's gone back and forth about wanting to have a kid. So he helps her kind of like process that emotionally. But that plot line definitely leads to a real gut punch scenario. I feel like, at least for me, like seeing that, like, she doesn't want to have a kid with the new boyfriend. Then she decides that she wants to, and then she has a miscarriage. And then we like find out at the end that she's broken up with him and he's with someone now who he has a kid with, and she's on her own, doing the photography thing. There was something kind of sad about that note. Like she seemed happy in that she's by herself, but there was still something like, for me, seeing that like a twinge of sadness to it as well, of like melancholy.
That's so interesting because I had the complete opposite reaction.
Yeah.
Yes, oh my God, I love this. I love that we have such divergent views on this. Yeah, no, for me, she looked so elated when she had the miscarriage, and like it looked like she had complicated feelings, but ultimately was elated, like, well, that's over. I don't have to make a decision. And yeah, she looks so happy because she was, doing photography on a film set, and she's by herself and she's living in her own apartment. Because I think the thing is that far too many women, and I should say straight women in hetero relationships, although it's certainly, I don't want to say, I guess it could happen to queer women too, but I've seen it happen too many times in hetero relationships where a woman, especially when she's young, just kind of builds her whole world around a guy. And so it's just, and she did that. She jumped from one relationship right to another relationship, and they moved in like right away in both cases. And so I found it really empowering and invigorating to see her by herself on her own, doing what she loves, and she's content with who she is. And I just thought that was such a brave ending. It's so great. There's very few films that I've seen make that same choice. The only other one I can think of is the Greta Gerwig film, Lola Versus, which ends in a very similar note. And so I found it just fantastic. I was elated that it ended that way.
Nice.
Yeah. But I love that the thing I love about this film is I think I also was not a fan of the heavy narration and all the chapters. Like, I don't necessarily think you need that. Yeah, I was like, I don't really think you need it. I think you could take this all out and it would be a much stronger film. But I think for me, what makes this such a compelling film, in addition to the performances, in addition to the great dialogue, is that there's so many layers here. There's so much happening on an emotional level. And I think you could really like pick this apart and really dig into it and dissect it and analyze it. And I love that.
Yeah, it goes some places. There's a lot of sex and nudity in this. There's a pretty crazy mushroom trip, which goes to some some kooky places, to say the least. It's interesting. I'll say that.
Yeah. But I love its conversations. I agree with all of that. And I love its conversations about motherhood. Like the whole conversation that she has with Axel talking about children. And he's like, we should just have them. And she's like, but I don't want them. And I don't want everything on your timetable. It's so great. And it's such a great conversation. And I love that. And there's just so much. There's just so much to unpack. And I really love that. And I really love that the title is like, it's setting you up to think that she's this awful, horrendous person, and she's not, like, at all. No. And it is very, I've seen the description that it's a very humanistic portrayal, and I agree with that. I think it is. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed this.
I'm glad you had fun. I think it was in hindsight a little too introspective for me. I think that I tend to not be as big a fan of movies that are super introspective, but I saw moments in this that I enjoyed.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Dave, I think you'd actually really dig this.
Yeah,
a lot.
You definitely would, Dave.
Yeah. And this is Norway's pick for their Oscar entry.
Norway. Well, good luck to them.
There's some stiff competition this year already.
Yeah. So that sounds like that's all 6 movies that you both saw at IFF Boston.
Yep.
Yes, at the Fall Focus, their little mini film fest in between their big spring festival.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Well, unless you have any final thoughts, maybe we should move on to horror noir with an E.
Yes, let's
do it.
Horror noir. This is an anthology, a Shudder anthology. It is directed by Kimani Ray Smith, and it has 6 stories in it, written by, and this is a lot of names, Tanarive Due, Stephen Barnes, Ezra Clayton Daniels, Chanel Edwards, Victor Laval, and Al Letson. I almost said Art Letson. I don't know why. Big cast too. Rachel True, Tony Todd, Peter Stormare, Sean Patrick Thomas, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Evan, you saw the whole thing, and Megan, you saw one of the segments. So
I did.
So I think you saw the first segment, right?
I did.
Okay,
yes.
So why don't you both talk about that one, and then Evan, you can take over and do the whole rest of the fucking thing.
The whole shebang.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, the first one's called The Lake, and it's about this woman who's a teacher, and she's arrived in a new town, and she's bought this house that's on a lake, and we know from the beginning of the film that some kind of accident happened where some quote-unquote creature from the lake, possibly an alligator, ate at least 2 people in the neighborhood, a reverend and a little girl, I think it was, and so everyone is warning her, don't go in the lake. And of course she goes in the lake.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. And she starts this like transformation into this scary lake monster kind of person. Like first it's like she's got itchy ribs, and then like her ribs, you know, these lines turn into like gills, and so
webbing between her fingers.
Yeah. And yeah, weird dreams. Like she dreams that she's like out in the lake taking a giant bite out of a fish, and then she's like a pet fish next to her bed, and then like the next morning the tank is completely empty.
She hisses at her cat.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then also she has this student that she invites over to do yard work for her, and then she's hitting on him, and it made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, especially because we find out that she had an inappropriate relationship with a student at her last job.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. In Boston, by the way. I thought that was funny. And so, yeah, she's inviting him over and like, oh, you should come in the lake with me.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then chomp chomp happens.
Yeah. Oh. To borrow one of Dave's favorite expressions.
Chomp.
Yep.
It's right up there with splatter splatter. Don't forget that one.
Ooh.
Yeah. I haven't used that one in the show before, but so she chomps the student.
Yes.
Hmm.
And then it just ends.
This segment? Yeah, it does. Did you like this segment, Megan?
No.
It's definitely one of my lesser one of the ones I liked the least.
Oh, damn it. And that's anthology. The one I saw.
I know. So as with all anthologies, I would say, you know, this one definitely has its uneven chapters. But what I was surprised about is for an anthology that's 2.5 hours long, I didn't often feel the length. It felt like the stories moved at a pretty good clip, especially the first few stories where I felt like I got just the right amount of story and kind of a sharp ending, like you're just referring to, where it kind of like he hits you with whatever the twist is, and it's like, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
On to the next thing.
Yeah, it's not wasting any time. It's getting in, getting out, and moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I do really
six,
like.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And I do really like that. I will say I do like the kind of body horror element of it, that her body is changing. I think that's really cool. I just wish I wish the writing and the acting had been better, but yeah.
Yeah, that first segment has kind of like a cheesy 70s horror vibe, but I don't feel like that's a good thing. No,
but what I will say is it's always great to see it's always great to see inclusive and diverse horror. And so I really love that not only is this created by Black filmmakers and not only are there Black actors, but there's Black artists infused into this. And like, I know I started watching the second one and I know that there's Black art in that too. But I love that the teacher, the protagonist, she talks about Audre Lorde, who is was an amazing Black womanist lesbian poet. And I kind of love that infusion. And I love that the story starts off with like cop sirens, which is always like, oh God, what's happening? Because, but like, so I love that, that those touches infused in that. And I can't wait to watch the rest because I want to see more. So, but I want to hear you talk about more.
Yeah, that second one I think is definitely one of my favorites of the 6. It's called Brand of Evil, and it's about this artist who he's working on a mural at the beginning, and there's this creepy white guy who calls him up and hires him. He wants to hire him. He wants to pay him. I think it's $5,000 to do this like graphic art thing for him, but the catch is he's got to do it before sundown. And so he like makes this weird symbol based on this like very specific set of instructions, and he makes the $5,000 and he's like, sweet. But then that symbol turns into this thing that kills one of the people in this Black neighborhood. And then so he keeps getting these series of assignments to make these symbols, and he keeps getting like offered more and more and more money. And so he's like having a hard time turning it down because it's so much money, and he's getting into this, like pattern of greed where he's just like can't say no, but it's killing people in the neighborhood. And it turns out that they're these like neo-Nazi symbols that are killing Black people and like absorbing their souls so they can bring this demon about. It's
oh my God,
really freaking good.
Is the creepy white guy Peter Stormare? Just out of curiosity. Oh, okay, because he's in this.
That's funny. I thought it was going to be him too.
He's a different creepy white guy, but there is this scene. Oh my God, there's this extremely unsettling scene where the main character Nakani, who's also queer actually, which I enjoyed seeing that. He is in his house, like working on his computer, and there's a bed that you can see in the background behind with like a screen. And there's a slow pan. You see this bald guy who looks kind of like Hitchcock at first, sitting on the bed in the background. And it just, oh my God, I was jumping out of my skin. Like, when is he going to pop out? And then like a split second later, he senses something's off. So he goes to the bed and there's no one there, but you can see like an outline of a person under the covers, and then the guy pops out from under the covers. It's
gross.
Yeah. So I found this one really compelling. It's one of my favorites.
The Brand of Evil.
Yeah, it has a lot to say from a social commentary perspective, and I think it's just a compelling story and a compelling idea of like, if you're an artist, like how high is your price? And then like once you realize like what your art is doing, because someone does tip him off like, hey dude, you're making like neo-Nazi symbols, and he's like, I don't know, I mean, maybe it kind of looks like this thing you're showing me, but also I'm getting paid $10,000 for this.
Wow.
I have to say too, that guy Brandon Michael Smith, I love him. He was great on You're the Worst, and whenever I see him anywhere, it's a delight to see him.
I haven't seen You're the Worst, but I've heard good things. I need to check it out.
You should.
Oh, Brett, yeah. I watched the first episode. It was fun.
It gets less fun as it goes on, but in a deeper way. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
But my point is he's great. So so I'm not surprised this one was so good.
Mm-hmm. The next one I wasn't a big fan of. It's called Bride Before You. It's this like Victorian Reconstruction era kind of story that's just filled with oppressive voiceover. I'm not even going to really waste much time on it because it was actually pulling me out of the movie how much I was disliking it. But the one after that, Fugue State, I thought was also really good. And it's about this guy who's an expert in cults. And he's played by Malcolm Barrett. And he hears about this local religious leader and his like cult church or whatever, and so he wants to go check it out. Also, there's these mysterious killings happen where these people with red faces are terrorizing and killing people. His wife's a journalist and she's trying to unravel that mystery, so he goes to this church and he gets hypnotized by the preacher and becomes like knee deep in this cult, and like it loses all sense of reality, is completely enmeshed in the cult. His wife is so horribly alarmed by this and can't do anything to pull him out of the cult, and it's so it's so effective, I think, especially because I feel like they wait for a while to drop the fact that this preacher is played by Tony Todd, who I could easily see hypnotizing people
with his very charismatic, smooth voice.
So
totally.
This was another one that I thought was like really well done and so appropriate for, the age of disinformation and like people getting, brainwashed. It just, I don't know, it felt so timely, but also just really compelling. So that was my second favorite one. That was also a really good one. The next one after that, Daddy, was about a father and a son. This one's okay. There's like this idea of like this father who, like a young father, he's got a young son, and him and his wife are living in this apartment in kind of like an urban area and just trying to like protect their son. And that's kind of like involves a doppelganger. He has to fight like a doppelganger of himself. That I enjoyed that aspect of the story. And then there's Sundown, which I think was the last of them, which also was a fun and compelling story about there are these people who are canvassing for a political campaign. Most of them are white. And then there's a couple that are black that are part of the and they're in West Virginia, rural West Virginia, canvassing, and they come upon this town, and when they're there, they see this sign that says, whites only after dark, and they come out and their tires are slashed, and so everyone is stuck there. And then Peter Stormare is the crazy, creepy rural small town mayor, and then it turns out that the town is crawling with vampires. And they're all white except for there's one black vampire in the town, played by the guy who plays Huel on Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, and I really enjoyed him in this. So yeah, it's like about these people being trapped in this small town in West Virginia and like trying to figure out if they can escape
with racist vampires.
With racist vampires, yeah.
I need to see this immediately.
That's kind of amazing.
It's also like a really compelling and fun. It's a little bit campy and cheeky, but it's also like a compelling story, especially like the idea of this this racist white vampire town and these couple of black characters that are trying to escape.
That's kind of amazing, though. What an idea!
Right?
It's like, not only is there vampires everywhere, but they're also racist.
Well, yeah, and like that's one of the things. So Lavelle Crawford, who plays the character I was mentioning earlier, the guy who was Huel from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, he explains to them like, also, like they want dark meat, like that's their thing, is that they like get off on that, and so like they're gonna get to everyone else and they're gonna save you for last because they want to eat you like when the blood moon is like highest or whatever.
Oh my god,
it just adds so much creep factor, and it's kind of corny, like some of the vampire staking fighting parts of it, but I really dug it as well.
You know what's so interesting too, I feel like, about making the vampires racist, like in a great way, in a cool way, is that so often vampirism in films and novels too is shown as like this really seductive, sexy thing, very intimate. And like here it's like, no, they're gross racists. Like I kind of love that.
Me too. And another great like spin that they put on the story is like the other colleagues of theirs, the white colleagues of theirs in the canvassing group, are like, I don't know, let's give these guys a chance. Let's go sit down to dinner with them that they invited us to. And like, I don't know, maybe this isn't so bad. Like they're so quick to be dismissive of the black characters in this, and I feel like that just added like this other great dimension to it, is that they're so quick to settle in and be dismissive and just willing to sell out their colleagues. And so I feel like that plays out in a compelling way as well.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Well, Evan, I feel bad then coming up on our last movie, Chameleon Street, because off mic, you were saying, so.
Yeah. Woof, this movie.
Evan, that's your second woof of the show. I love it.
Yeah. So Chameleon Street. Well, let's get back to what we were talking about earlier. This is a 1989 movie. It was entered in Sundance. It won the 1990 Grand Jury Prize for Drama. Steven Soderbergh was on the jury that year because he'd won Sex, Lies, and Videotaped the year before. Anyway, Chameleon Street. It is written and directed by Wendell B. Harris Jr., and it is about a guy named William Douglas Street, who is a chameleon, an impersonator, a con man, a grifter, all sorts of things, based on a real dude whose name is William Douglas Street Jr. Wendell B. Harris is, I think, a pretty compelling actor who I have only seen him in two other movies. He's in Out of Sight. He plays the leader of the FBI task force that Karen Sisko thinks is kind of an idiot. And he plays the professor in Road Trip, who is Breckenmeyer's history professor or philosophy professor or whatever he is. He's this kind of, he's this actor with sort of a commanding presence and this sort of like deep resonating voice. But Chameleon Street is a little different. Let me read the IMDb thing here, which is way too long. You know how IMDb summaries are always a sentence? This is like 14 sentences.
Yeah, it's a user description, so that makes sense.
Okay, so here we go. And I think this is actually kind of a terrible description, but here we go. William Douglas Street is bored with his life. Working for his father is getting to him. His wife wants more money, and he's had enough. His solution is to reinvent himself. He becomes a chameleon, taking on whatever role suits the situation. From reporter to doctor to lawyer, he impersonates anyone he sees a need for, and he can earn money being. The movie is based on the real people, William Douglas Street Jr. and Eric Dupin or something like that. It's based on a couple different people.
Yeah, they say it. There's a title card right in the beginning where they explain that too.
Right. So, Evan, lay it on me.
So this plot summary makes this movie sound a lot more compelling than it is. It kind of paints the picture of it kind of being a catch me if you can kind of thriller about this guy who's really great at blending in and impersonating people and using charisma and guile to fake his way. And he does do that. He's all of the things that this plot summary says. He at one point becomes a student at Yale, pretends he's French. He does all kinds of just amazing
Performs
stuff.
A successful hysterectomy.
Yeah. He performs surgery.
Ridiculous. Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's
the real
thing
guy
about
did
this.
that.
Yeah.
I'm horrified.
36.
I'm horrified.
Yeah.
36 successful hysterectomies. Apparently.
I'm horrified to hear this, that someone who had literally no idea what they were doing were operating on women and doing this procedure.
Yes. Agreed.
I mean, let's just boil down to my major problem with this is that he as a character is so insufferable and just a slime bag. Like he's to me, he doesn't have any redeeming qualities. He does all this stuff. He tricks people. He's shitty to his wife. He cheats on her. He's sexist. He's misogynist. He spends all this time talking about fucking women. Like there's this scene where he's interviewing this woman who is, I think, a basketball player, an up and coming basketball player, and he's just giving voiceover about how he wants to fuck her. And I'm just like, it's so hard for me to watch this movie because he's just such an irredeemable prick the entire time. And any kind of enjoyment I might get out of him, pulling the wool over people's eyes is just ruined by the fact that I just cannot root for him. And when he gets turned in and arrested by his wife, he gets turned in by his wife and arrested at the end of the movie. And I was thrilled that the movie was finally over and that he was finally going back to prison, because he was in prison before and escaped. And I don't even remember if they revisit that aspect of the movie.
I don't think so. There's a lot of stuff about this that I found quite compelling that But unfortunately, I think a combination of a super low budget. I mean, it's kind of, I couldn't tell whether this was 16 blown up to 35 or what. The restoration actually looks pretty good, but it's so low budge.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely the work of a first time. I don't know how many short films Wendell B. Harris made or any other feature. He's never written or directed another movie since this. And he's, as far as I know, he's only acted in those couple things, but it's got some really compelling moments. There's some like decent camera work. Well, I should say weird camera work. I think out of necessity. I didn't find his character so repulsive, mostly because I like the actor. If you remember him in Out of Sight, he's a completely different. He plays kind of a stooge really well in that. In this, though, yeah, his character's kind of a douche, kind of a dickbag. Whatever. How did you describe him?
Yeah.
Irredeemable prick.
Yeah, he's an irredeemable in a slime bag. And he's charismatic. Like, he gives a charismatic performance. And there are moments where there's funny lines of dialogue or voiceover or, you know, like you said, interesting camera choices or editing choices that I was amused by. But those were just it was so hard to appreciate those when I was just so turned off by everything else that was going on around it.
Well, one of the things that's hard about it is it's really all over the place in tone and, you know, it goes from like, it plays the whole hysterectomy thing for laughs.
Ew.
But then it plays like, there's this one point where he's pretending to be a Yale student and he's having an affair with another student there, and they're sitting in front of this fireplace. But that is like, that scene's played for like straight drama, you know? And it veers from comedy to drama to farce to, you know, social commentary to, cause the whole story is kind of like, the underpinning is that he's doing this because it's so difficult for Black people, particularly Black men, to make it in the United States. Perfectly valid story. You know, and totally realistic. So that all kind of, you know, plays. But to Evan's point, it's just a lot of it's just kind of like unseemly. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, he spends a lot of time complaining about how his wife only cares about money.
Yeah,
and
he's
just always railing on her about that. And then toward the end, when he realizes that she's turned him in, after he's done plenty of unseemly things, he says something to the effect of, "I finally figured out that what all women are out for, blood." And it's just like,
oh,
is that what he says?
Yeah, he says something to that effect. It's gross after like all the disgusting things that he's done and the way he's treated her. Like, he totally is.
In fairness to Wendell B. Harris Jr., I don't get the impression that he was endorsing that sentiment. But
I'm not accusing him of doing that, but I'm saying the character. Like, it's hard to watch a movie with such an irredeemable character, and like there's shades of that in other movies, and it's sometimes easier to excuse than others. But this, to me, it was just so saturated in the voiceover and the character and like the arc of the character. I just maybe I'm not supposed to root for this guy, but it's just so hard to not have anything to latch onto for an hour and a half.
The other thing that was that I did like about it was there are 8 bajillion locations in this movie, and this movie cost $0 to make. I mean, I would be surprised if this cost, now this is a guess, but in $1989 or however long it took them to film it, I would be surprised if this cost more than $100,000. And it's like, I mean, how many different now maybe it's just like a different wall in the same building, but it looks like there are 75 locations in this movie. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's the prison, there's the psychologist office, there's the Yale library, which looks like a college library. Like, I don't know where it is, but it looked legit to me.
Well, they shot it in the Detroit area. I know that, but I think they shot it in Detroit. Well, his character's from Detroit because he talks about going to Wayne State University and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, you can see why at the tail end of the 80s, the early 90s, when Sundance was still a genuinely outsider film festival, why this would be such a big deal. But yeah, I think what I was interested in it, and I don't know whether I can say I liked it, but I appreciate it. And I also think that Wendell B. Harris had a lot of, I mean, clearly really smart guy, good actor. Like, what happened to him? I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, lots of people who make low budget films don't quite make it past that, but they make one or two other movies. This guy's done nothing. I mean, he pops up everywhere. There are articles about him and things like that, but I just don't really know much else that he's done. He's probably got like a huge body of work in the theater that I'm totally glossing over or something like that. But it is hard to overlook all of the very choppy editing and just so much voiceover. You guys know how I feel about voiceover, and there's just like endless voiceover in this movie.
So much.
I was impressed that they were able to like sandwich it all in a sort of organic way. But the other thing is like, because this sort of jumps from one of his scams to his next scam to his next scam, it doesn't really explain how he's pulling this off or why he chooses to go into this particular one. It's like, why become a reporter? Why pretend to be a doctor? He does kind of explain why he pretends to be a student. I remember that, but I just feel like there's also so much information thrown at you in these 90 minutes. It's kind of hard to keep up. So anyway, there's a lot in this. So
I know I haven't seen the film, but I have to say, listening to you both talk about it, and I am going to watch it. I don't want to though, and because I like plenty of films and TV with unsavory characters who are the protagonists, quote unquote unlikable protagonists. But there's something, you said it very well, Evan. There has to be something to root for. Like there has to be, they have to be charismatic, compelling, something. And this has been. Everything I've read about this, it's been lauded as like this, masterpiece of Black cinema. And, it's kind of been forgotten, but, it shouldn't be because it's amazing. And yeah, listening to all of the like sexism and misogyny, I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah, well, I read a couple of like contemporary reviews, and they were not like the review in the Washington Post. I can't remember precisely what it is. It explains everything kind of like we did. And then it says it's like, this is a great concept, but this guy doesn't know how to fucking make a movie.
Yikes.
It's like he doesn't know how to direct actors. He doesn't know how to like, pace things. And I kind of feel like that's an accurate criticism. But I think a lot of it probably has to do with budget constraints and things like that. But the screenplay is choppy as hell, which shows up in the final product. So I don't know.
Yeah. The one other thing I wanted to say was that when you brought up a great point about like, what else has he done? It's strange that Wendell B. Harris Jr. only directed one film, but that actually happens surprisingly more often than not with independent Black filmmakers.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it happens a lot to women filmmakers too. It's like you get all these.
I actually didn't finish. I was going to say that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, you were 100% reading my mind. Like, yes, it happens quite often to Black filmmakers, to women filmmakers. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, I can't remember the name of the movie we watched, but it's about the Black woman. It was mid-90s.
Julie Dash?
No, not Julie Dash. No, not Daughters of the Dust. That's a great movie.
So great.
And I think did she make any more movies? She's made at least one other movie. She has,
but it took a long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess kind of one of the things that I think is just kind of pisses me off about filmmaking generally is you have all these white dudes who make these low budge first and maybe second features, and they fucking direct a Marvel movie. And then Patty Jenkins, how long did it take her between, like, she directed Monster, and then she directed a bunch of TV, and then she finally got a fucking big budge movie. And and that's just common and sort of not sort of shitty, it's shitty.
No, it is shitty. That's why it's so exciting. I mean, and I know a lot of people are tired of Marvel films, but that's why it's such a big deal that Chloe Zhao is doing Eternals, because it's like, you know, it's so rare for a woman to get a big budget, especially when they come from the indie world. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's Chameleon Street. So
yeah, it is a shame that we didn't see more from him, because I feel like even though I had such distaste for this movie, there was something to it in that it felt like it was making bold choices. And so maybe if he had more films under his belt, we would have seen him progress more as a filmmaker. And that's a shame that we didn't get that. He didn't get that opportunity, and we didn't get that opportunity as an audience to see him grow and to maybe tell some different stories.
That's such a great point, Evan. And I love that you just said that, because it reminds me of something I just read that Denis Villeneuve said in an interview, where he said the reason he got Dune and the reason he was able to do Dune was because of all the other films he's done before, particularly Blade Runner 2049. And that's the thing. And like, you know, like you were saying, Dave, white men get ample opportunities. And if Wendell B. Harris Jr. had gotten more opportunities to tell more stories, you know, and to hone his craft more, you know, who knows what we would have seen. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah, I urge you to rewatch the couple scenes that he's in Out of Sight. He's just great, I think. So
I'm not surprised, because everybody's great in Out of Sight.
Yeah, but that's true.
It's such a fantastic movie. I also want to plug Maya Cade's Black Film Archive, which is amazing because she's chronicling like every Black made film. So it's a great resource.
Oh,
nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted. Well, that, and Evan, I'm assuming that you're all done with Chameleon Street. Okay.
I am done.
So we got to do some wrap ups here, everybody. The IFFBoston stuff. Megan, I'm gonna see if I can get the 4 movies right. Spencer, yay or nay?
Yes.
Belfast.
Yeah. You don't have to rush out and see it, but sure.
Happening.
Yes.
Memoria.
Yes, definitely, because who knows when you'll get a chance to see it. It's a rare
I know.
opportunity.
I know. When you said that, I was like kind of heartbroken.
Yeah. No idea when it's coming back to Boston.
Yeah. So, okay, the both of you. Petit Maman.
Yes.
Yes.
And worst person in the world.
I would say yes, but Evan, I'm intrigued.
I'm a no, I think.
Oh, wow. We're split.
Yeah.
Right. So look for those movies wherever you look for movies. Horror Noir.
That's going to be on Shudder.
Yes, that's going to be on Shudder. Evan, yay or nay?
I would say yay.
Megan, based on the one story you saw.
I would still say yay, just because there's such a dearth of, you know, Black horror films by Black filmmakers. So I would still say yay even after that one. And I'm excited to see the rest that I've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of intrigued to see the lake, if for no other reason. It's like people tell her, hey, don't go in the lake because someone got chomped. And she's like, cool. And then she goes in the lake and then she turns into the lake monster?
Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
It's a great concept. I will say that. I didn't say that before, but I should have said that because it is a great, great concept.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Chameleon Street is being re-released. It's showing this week at BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York, but it'll be around. And Evan, I'm going to go out on a limb, wild guess here, and say no for you.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, I'm going to give it a qualified yes, for all of the reasons that I just rambled through in the explanation of it there. So anyway, I forgot to mention it at the top of the episode. Please do consider joining our Patreon. You get all sorts of free audio and You get all sorts of bonus audio if you are a patron for just $5 a month, 5 bones, if you will. You get exclusive audio each week. You get to vote in polls. And this week was a Patreon poll. The poll was, which Frankenstein themed movie do you want us to watch? And you chose The Bride, patrons. So The Bride, starring Sting and Jennifer Beals, is over on the Patreon right now. it is a lively and boisterous conversation. And we obviously, for selfish reasons, we want you to join the Patreon, but we really had a lot of fun talking about that one. So, yeah. Thank you, patrons, by the way. And so that does it for us on Spoiler Piece this week. We want to thank our editor, Otto Clammer. Thank you, Otto, for taking the editing brouhaha out of our hands each week.
Thank you, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you can get podcasts. If you want to check us out on the webs, we're at spoilerpiece.com. That's our website. On social medias, we're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you'd like to email us to get in touch with us and be like, you know what, The Lake is some bullshit, but the other 5 horror Noir stories are great. You can email us at spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail. We love to hear your comments, and some of them really make us laugh. If you like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. And if you really, really like the show, as I just mentioned, we have a Patreon. It would be totes awesome if you joined. So anyway, my name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm at Dave Sees Movies on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on social media at Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel. And you can find me on Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, all that jazz.
All that jazz.
All that jazz hands.
I know. I'm just thinking jazz hands. Now I have to watch Chicago. My name is Megan Kearns. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinion S.
All right. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.